Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. We are so glad to have you here. It's been a while. It's been a minute. So let's go ahead and move on. Keep dropping in the chat those your names, your institutions, and especially that song that's carrying you into the summer. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. We are here to reflect back on lessons from a year online. We're kind of revisiting the problem solving webinars that we started a year ago, a few weeks more than a year, when everything shut down in person and we moved high school, college, student services, everything online. This community came together and provided a lot of support and help for each other. We have some amazing guests today. We will be introducing them as we move along. As always, we're going an hour and a half today, so we're going to have plenty of time for questions, especially at the end. Let's go ahead and move on, Aded. We've got a few things on the agenda today. We're going to give a few updates. We have 3 featured partnerships to focus on. We've got Oakland Unified and their partnership with Peralta. We have Compton College. We have Skyline College. We're going to do an Ask Me Anything kind of question section, although really it's not. It's Ask Me Anything about dual enrollment. And some notes from the field, things that we're seeing, and then we're going to close up. And so we have a great team with you today. Your CLP team is Sherry Shojai is all over the chat, and she's doing all kinds of behind the scene things. Aded Flores is our webmaster for today, and will be facilitating, a senior director at CLP. We also have our closed captioner here today, so we're very appreciative. CLP is an awesome nonprofit who I love working for. We engage in equity-minded community college redesign, and I think most of the folks on the line know about us, but you can always visit us and shoot us an email after the webinar. Let's go ahead one more, and for our chat, if you have a question, we ask you to capitalize who the question is for. So if it's for OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, if it's for Compton, or if it's a general Ask Me Anything kind of question, you can just put AMA. And if you have something, you need some technical assistance, please write tech, and you will get a direct message back. Okay, let's move on to some updates here. Okay, so it's been a crazy year. It's been a wild year, but we're all here. And as my colleague Michelle Arthur from El Camino said this morning, every storm runs out of rain. So there we go. We wanted to make sure that everyone has the archives of all the dual enrollment problem solving webinars that we did over the past year. So I just dropped that into the chat. And we know that college enrollments, especially community colleges, are on the decline, with a few exceptions across the state. And this is really worrisome because people are delaying their college or they're stopping out because of a lot of economic insecurity. You know, their lives have been disrupted. And certainly as a community college practitioner and advocate, this worries me a lot because we know that post-secondary credentials really support people in earning higher wages, especially over their lifetime. But so when they stop out on that journey, it just, you know, it's worrisome. But despite that downturn, many college and high school partnerships have seen a rise in dual enrollment. Now we know this is not uniform; it's not everywhere, but really quite a few have been surprising. And so that's been very exciting to see, I think, and it's due in no small part to the good work of all the folks who are on this webinar this morning, and certainly our panelists. We also wanted to let you know there is The U.S. Department of Education recently released another volume to their COVID reopening handbook. And this is primarily geared towards our K-12 partners. And they do a special call out for dual enrollment. So there's been a lot of conversation across the country about learning loss. And I would ask us to take a pause and just really kind of examine the deficit-minded thinking behind that, even that term of learning loss. And so one of the things I appreciate about this handbook is they talk about loss of instructional time, which is true. And I would also, challenge us to pause and think about take an asset-based approach to the crazy year. So while our students, whether in high school or college or both, have had incredible disruptions, they have picked up new skills. They have learned some incredible flexibility. They have shown amazing resilience, and those are all things that we can build on. So the U.S. Department of Ed handbook talks a lot about how to accelerate, not remediate. So how do we accelerate students in this, move to reopening? And one of the strategies that they call out is dual enrollment. And so if you need some backup, if you need some support when you're going to administrators asking to use some of that recovery funding or the emergency funding to support dual enrollment, you can point straight to this U.S. Department of Education handbook and dual enrollment as a strategy to accelerate, not remediate. We also wanted to point out that there's a couple of new laws being proposed. Thank you to Assemblymember Holden. AB 102 would remove the sunset date for CCAP. So that's pretty exciting stuff. And then AB 103 would allow for county offices of education to be able to partner in CCAP agreements. And the reason that is so phenomenally important that they are able to partner in CCAP is that county offices of ed provide a lot of the alternative schooling. And they provide schooling often for justice impacted youth, as was pointed out by our dear colleagues at the Youth Law Center. I hope someone from the Youth Law Center is on the webinar today. So we really, we certainly are tracking these and hope that alternative schools as run by county offices of ed are able to participate in CCAP. And then finally, as by way of update, we wanted to point out a recent publication that was shepherded by our colleagues at EdTrust West, but also had so many amazing and wonderful advocacy groups sign on to. And there's some great suggestions in here and models for how we can use recovery funds. But reimagining and rebuilding California schools, restarting school with equity at the center. And again, they take a very asset-based approach, and that's something I very, very much appreciate. So we want folks to continuously drop questions in and comments into the chat. We will be checking those out and scooping those. Oh, thank you to our dear friend Diane Walker from Antelope Valley, who put in a intentional acts of dual enrollment report. We love that. That's great. Please check that one out. And with that, we are going to move on to our first colleagues here. We have Oakland Unified School District is taking the helm, and we'll talk about their wonderful partnership with the Peralta Community College District. I do want to point out that our dear colleague, Dr. Siri Brown from Peralta, was unexpectedly called away today. So we are certainly sending her our warm wishes and our thoughts of care. And our dear friends and colleagues from Oakland Unified are going to take it away. All right, ladies, go for it.
Thanks so much, Naomi. Thank you for the invite, CLP, and thanks to all the attendees for making the time to listen in on the conversation today. Um, so we're going to start with some high-level kind of overview of our programming that we've done in partnership with the Peralta Community College District. We'll get into some data, and then we're going to share some of the lessons, some of the pivots we made during the pandemic, and then some of the lessons we learned. And yes, Siri is not able to join us, so I'm going to try my hardest to speak on some of the Peralta points. So our program, we launched our dual enrollment partnership and programming with Peralta in the fall of 2015. And since then, so we've been around for 6 years. And since then, we've served over 6,000 students. That's over 11,000 course enrollment. So students who took more than one course. That's over 440 dual enrollment college courses taught by over 100 Peralta faculty, and we've served all of our high schools. So we have 16 in our school district. Our students have saved millions in future college costs. If folks have questions about how that's been computed, I can definitely share that. You can email me, but it's basically fees and cost of living or cost of attendance. And now in Oakland Unified, actually more students earn college credit through dual enrollment than our AP programming. And of course, most importantly, dual enrollment has expanded the college access opportunities to underserved students in a way that AP wasn't getting at, and also concurrent enrollment wasn't getting at. You know, as you guys know, bringing a college course to a high school campus and having all of those supports embedded at the high school and having two institutions really explicitly address the barriers that have long existed is the kind of systemic change that needed to take place in order for our students to have access to these opportunities. Next slide. So again, some high level data, you kind of see the trajectory of our growth. We started with 15 courses in the fall of 15, and now we have roughly 45 courses every semester, serving about 1,000 students each semester. And you see some more data, our pass rates. I'll speak to that at a later slide, but on average, 82% of our students have passed with a C or higher. Next slide. Oh, actually, sorry, go back to that slide. In the top right-hand corner, that's a public link to our OUSD dual enrollment data dashboard. To be totally honest, we have been, just like you guys, like overwhelmed with the pandemic. And so we haven't updated our dual enrollment data dashboard. So, you know, it definitely needs like several semesters or a few semesters worth of data, but you can play around on there and see some of our data for the program. And next slide. I know many of you probably read the Wheelhouse research. It was a couple years ago. They reported that, you know, statewide 12.6% of California high school students have taken a community college course. In Oakland, our class of 2019, 38% of our students took one or more dual enrollment courses. That research is also linked right there. So feel free to check that out. Next slide. So we're gonna kind of skip through the Peralta slides and I'll speak to our collective work together. So if you skip 3 slides, right here, perfect. So I've, you know, we had to, like all of you, pivot a ton during a very unexpected pandemic year. And I like really credit our kids, our students who made the biggest pivot and had to really abruptly switch to virtual learning and still succeed. And also our Peralta instructors and our school sites. That said, as far as like the institutional changes that we made together with Peralta, so I think one of the sort of promising practices that came out of the pandemic, for a long time, Fatima and I were like shuffling papers. I don't know if any of you were doing this. It could have just been an Oakland thing. We actually were still dealing with paper forms. And you know, students and their parents or guardians, and then the school had to sign off and give them permission to take a dual enrollment class. And then we would shuffle that over to the Peralta A&R office. And it was pretty ridiculous, but we did that every semester with like, you know, not 1,000 pieces of paper because it was a one form process, which is great. So basically one form covered their entire high school career. And that was launched in 2016. But in the pandemic, it really forced us to accelerate like digitizing that entire process. And it actually was a major win. It was a move that we were trying to make for many years. And so the entire enrollment process became fully digital. And that was really, you know, invited by school sites, by students. It made everything much easier and more efficient. The EW process, I would say, it was also pretty effective. We had to make that pivot and make it electronic. It was also incredibly important for EWs to exist during the pandemic, because as you guys all know, like our students struggled a ton. Internally, we had a system that allowed our schools, it's called Informed K-12. Many of you may, if you're from a school district, know about it, but we, especially our larger high schools, use that to distribute dual enrollment forms in bulk and then collect e-signatures and sign them in bulk too. Next. Our program structures. So we did make some shifts to give you a sense of our dual enrollment programming. We ask our schools to invest in a dual enrollment coordinator. It's not a full-time position, but it is a significant part of someone's work. We also have point people for each of our dual enrollment courses to essentially take attendance for the high school and also really intensively support students when they're struggling. And also sort of be a liaison with the Peralta professor. And those people became incredibly important during the pandemic. In debriefing with our school sites, a lot of them actually, they had lots of opinions about our, you know, the upcoming fall, because they invested so heavily in making sure students were successful during the pandemic year. Some of them became burnout, and I don't think it was only attributed to dual enrollment, but I think that that was a big part of it, you know, supporting students who were already struggling, and then you throw in a pandemic, and then you throw in supporting them to succeed in a virtual college course. It became just a ton of work for our school sites to really lean in around. We also have course agreement meetings for each of our dual enrollment courses. So each of those 45 courses, we always sit down and we map out exactly all of the logistics entailed in what it means to teach a college course at the high school. We have the professor there, and then we have a school site representative. Usually it's the dual enrollment coordinator and the point person. And Fatima and I facilitate those conversations. Those became super important as an anchor for virtual learning. We had to map out every level of like, okay, is it sync? Is it async? How exactly is it going to flow? And those conversations became so important so that unexpected things didn't pop up, and unexpected things still did pop up. And I would say a big pivot is also instructors digitized almost all of their course materials. And that was also super invited. Fatima is going to talk about student supports next.
Hi, good morning. So a big pivot for us, a big win was the Canvas TA access or guest access for our OUSD point person. So like Leslie mentioned, that's a point person from OUSD. We used to call it teacher of record, but we shifted the language because that person doesn't have to be a formal teacher. It could be a counselor, it could be someone else at the school site, but they're assigned to the course to support the instructor and the students. And so that person got access to Canvas, which was a huge win because even pre-pandemic, Canvas was like a blind spot for us. I remember being at school sites and I'd have to hover over a student's shoulder to be able to see what they could see on Canvas because we just didn't have the @peralta.edu email address to access. And so it was really hard for me to figure out like, what is Canvas and what is, this teacher's Canvas shall look like and to help students. So we petitioned for that. Siri did a huge job working with their union on their site to make sure that it could go through. And I think it was a win for instructors as well, because it meant that there's less emails coming from the OUSD point person asking about assignments or asking about students or asking about like, hey, kids are talking about this test. What is that about? The point person could log in. They were not shifting anything on the canvas. They couldn't edit anything, but it's just a view access. The TA access meant they did have access to a tab that says last activity. And that was huge for our classes, because basically you could see the students when they last logged in, if they ever logged in, and that helped point people narrow in on students who might be struggling, including with like tech access. So if I logged in and I saw, a student hadn't logged in 2 weeks or ever, I could reach out immediately to that student and be like, hey, what's up? Are you having tech issues, Wi-Fi issues, et cetera? So that was a huge win, and we hope, and from what we know, that will continue as we move back to in-person learning. We also kept all our guides updated, and they're like living online guides. For example, a step-by-step guide for students on how to set up all these wonderful Peralta tools like Canvas, Campus Solutions Portal, it used to be called Passport, Peralta email, how to set up email forwarding. So it's just a Google Doc. It's pretty long, but it's directed towards students, and it walks them through like, hey, you have all these new tools because you're now a Peralta student as well. Here's how to set it up. So school sites can use it, counselors, students, families. It's open access. A lot of instructors and OUSD point people or dual enrollment coordinators did delivery to students' homes of kits. So that could be paint supplies, construction supplies. One of our construction classes built laptop tables for students since they're working at home. And so that teacher drove to students' home. He's actually an OUSD Peralta adjunct teacher, but he drove to students' home and dropped off kits of materials for students. And then we created lots of e-templates that we shared through the course agreement meetings and through emails just throughout the semester that both instructors and OUSD folks could use. For example, for students, there's a template where they could just copy and paste like how to ask for help. And it would just be this template where they could just drop it into their email, send it off to the instructor to ask for help. Because for students, this might be their first college class, they're shy, they're not sure who to ask, especially in a virtual context. There's no person they're really interfacing with in person. And so templates like how to ask for help. There's a template where instructors and point people could list students of concern and just drop that in there. There's also a Google survey I created as something instructors could send in the first 2 weeks, where they could just collect information on students, like, is this your first college class? What email do you prefer? What are your plans for after high school? What are you nervous about? Do you work? A lot of our students in Oakland were working, not just part-time, but sometimes full-time to support family and other financial needs. So just finding out a little bit more about the students to build that rapport and relationship. And then we also had a to-do list for point people where basically we were suggesting for the OUSD point person, here's some things you can do throughout the semester to support. Some of our point people are returning point people. They've done it before, they've done it pre-pandemic. Some are new. And so they weren't really quite sure, like, what does it mean to be a point person for a dual enrollment class? So we just spelled that out for sites. And so it was clear. And then finally, a lot of check-ins, checking in with instructors. How's it going? Do you have any questions or concerns? We also did some optional visits to classes through Zoom, which was a huge highlight for Leslie and I, because as you can see, we work behind the scenes a lot, but we don't get to see it really on the ground as much as we'd like to. So we were able to pop in through the Zooms, and it's really phenomenal, the kind of learning and teaching that's happening, even virtually in our dual enrollment classes, and the pivots that students and instructors have made. So those check-ins and visits keep us in communication with instructors and able to lift up anything that came up throughout the weeks, both in fall and in spring.
Great. Next slide, please. So this next slide is about, like, kind of reflecting on what we may bring forward as we all kind of hopefully come towards the end of this pandemic. Oakland Unified School District, by the way, we announced 3 weeks ago that we'll be opening up fully in person, and we'll be back on a semester system in the fall. So and Peralta is largely virtual. So we're kind of working through the kinks of that. Um, but, I think the pandemic, you know, I really appreciated this opportunity, Naomi, and reflecting on this question of like, what would we keep? Because of course it was incredibly difficult for all of us. You know, it- so much for our kids, and but at the same time, I think that there were some things that we can sort of bring forward to innovate our practice. And so the first thing was that dual enrollment was by and large, at least our programming, was not virtual. We were in person. The courses took place at the high schools. The Peralta instructors came to the high school site and they taught in person, and we tried to just like merge our schedules and make it happen. But it's interesting because as I'm planning our fall courses in partnership with the Peralta instructors in the high schools, we're leaning a lot more on this sort of virtual hybrid model. And I think that people are seeing that it can be a tool as sort of part of the toolkit on how it is that we implement. Um, I think we want to be careful because virtual learning did not work for all of our kids. And I got lots of feedback from our high school sites. And it's interesting because one of our school sites loved it. And they were like, we love async and we love virtual learning, and our students did so well. But that was the school that is the most north in Oakland and is the most white. And, it's not shocking that our students with the highest population of the most vulnerable students struggled incredibly. And we had, so if you look at the next point, our average pass rate is 82%. And in the pandemic, it was 70%. So we dropped over 10 percentage points. And, so it doesn't work for everyone. And we have to be really thoughtful about how we use it as a tool and not just kind of switch over entirely. But we can be strategic and we can be thoughtful, and we can be thoughtful about what kind of like tech access we make available to students. And we can be really clear in those course agreement meetings about exactly how the professor is going to be using it as a tool and how the school will be supporting that experience for students. We found that student supports can be virtual, but honestly, it's much better in person. That's like the feedback we're getting from school sites across the board. It's incredible. It was really difficult to make the phone calls, to touch base with kids. And it didn't always work. Some students just ghosted and were really not responsive to any of the reach outs. And so, and we see the data to kind of show. And virtual tools are great. Naomi, I think this was you at one of our other kind of webinars during the pandemic, but Canvas can be used as an anchor or whatever sort of platform is being used. But for us, it was Canvas. And actually, I think it's really beneficial. And lots of our Peralta instructors are using it as kind of an organizational tool and a communication tool. And it's great having someone at the high school have access to that tool too, because everyone can kind of be on the same page. And we also we're very biased. We're not, our district has struggled a ton with, financial stability. And so course materials being digitized is really invited, and any money that our schools can save on investing in $5,000 books per course is invited. And so I think this is a big win, is that so many of the course materials have become digitized. And actually, some of our professors like surveyed students, and it works well for them too. There's been some out-of-box thinking around scheduling. I don't know how much of that can actually be applied now in the traditional school year. And virtual courses can be sort of, I like this. Virtual courses are a good way to for multiple high schools to share a course. And so that's another sort of tool that I think for us as a district, we may be leaning on, especially for schools that are smaller who can't meet the minimum enrollment numbers that Peralta asks us to have. And next slide. This is from Peralta. I'm just gonna, our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Siri Brown, she's not able to be here, but I know that they are committed to continuing to build the partnership around dual enrollment. This is a big priority, and they've committed to things like having embedded tutors in each of our dual enrollment courses, which is huge. Continuing to have Canvas access for school site folks. And then the other big thing is they're going to be supporting the enrollment of high schools by providing some folks from the college and the district to be virtually at the school sites around and to support around enrollment. I'm going to end it because I think we're at time.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And the chat is full of questions. We're going to move a lot of those questions to the end after we have our other presentations. That's why we're going an extra half an hour. But I have two very specific ones that I wanted to ask right away. The first is, there's been a few requests for you to share your step-by-step guides. Will you share those? You can drop them in the chat, or you can send them to me and we'll attach them to the resources. Fantastic. And then there's a question about Inform K-12. Were parents and students able to access Inform K-12 without an account, or was that set up through the district?
It's set up through the district. So if you have a @ousd.org email address, as all students and staff do, then you automatically have access to Informed K-12. So that's why we used it. It was just streamlined.
Excellent, excellent. And then I think one more very specific to your partnership question is the embedded tutors, are they Peralta students or are they high school students?
Peralta. They will be paid Peralta students.
Woohoo, yay, fantastic. Let's go on to the next slide. Thank you so much. We will have more opportunities to ask some questions of our OUSD colleagues, so keep putting those questions in the chat. And now we're going to hear from our colleague, Carlos Castellon from Compton College. Carlos, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Castro, for that. Hello, everyone, and happy to be here today. I'm going to be going over some of the aspects of the dual enrollment program at Compton College today, and really think about, at least this past year, what we've experienced as a program for our students and ways that we kind of address that. Dr. Castro inviting us, we really appreciate that, and are looking forward to really just sharing our work. And so this is just a quick snapshot of some of the different programs, dual enrollment programs that are offered at Compton College. So we have a traditional regular K through 12 concurrent enrollment. We have our afternoon college, which are college classes being taught on high school sites for students after school. And after that, we have an exclusive Compton Early College High School partnership in which every one of their students are taking a Compton College class with us. The goal of that is for students to hopefully end up with an Associates of Arts in General Studies with an emphasis in Arts and Humanities, while also completing IGETC and being receiving certification on that. We also have AB 288 or CCAP partnership agreements with several school districts in the area, ranging from Compton Unified to Paramount Unified and Linwood Unified school districts. And then lastly, we have an instructional service agreement with the California Academy of Math and Science, otherwise known as CAMS. Next slide, please. This is a quick snapshot of the enrollment over the past 4 or 5 years. So dual enrollment in 2016 in the fall, as you can see, started with a total of 564 students. And that has now more than close to tripled with almost 1,400 students as of fall 2020. In spring of 2016, you can see that we had 98 total enrollments. And now this spring semester 2021, we reached 1,331 students. And so this increase was really important for us to see and take a step back and say, okay, so we have quite a few number of students taking classes with us through dual enrollment. So what are we going to do, right? And on the next slide, you'll see that we kind of thought of 3 different things Within this past year, more so, I'd say that we really wanted to focus on. So number one, right, dual enrollment is not a singular effort. It's not just the dual enrollment program or department. There are multiple college sort of constituents who are contributing to the work, right? So we thought about how can we improve that, strengthen that. Number two, with 1,300 students, we wanted to find a way how we can provide direct student support, right? Someone or individuals for these students to reach out to, not just on the high school side, but on the college side as well. And then last but not least is expanding some of the existing college services to dual enrollment students. And I'm going to talk about some of those things as we move forward here. Next slide, please. So going back to talking about how dual enrollment isn't just singular or one department working. On the college side, we do have our academic affairs who focus a lot on redesigning curriculum for dual enrollment students, right? Hosting professional development throughout the semesters to inform them of the population, provide engaging sort of activities or ways that they can work with the student population that they're serving. And finding faculty who are excited, who are willing to be a part of this program, finding faculty who have experience teaching high school classes to be able to kind of provide that expertise. Our admissions and records department and working with them closely on things like registration, grade reporting. You know, we have a SharePoint grid where we kind of cross-reference with each other who's being enrolled in what, as sort of a system of checks and balances to make sure that we're not missing students, that whether they're submitting a dual enrollment approval form or even going as far back as the application and finding student IDs, making sure everyone is being accounted for. Our educational partnerships department, and specifically our amazing outreach team, hosting numerous application workshops specifically for dual enrollment students, alerting them of kind of the onboarding process and having, you know, that specific guidance in that sort of initial contact. Following that up, you know, our Student Success Center, we said, hey, we have, you know, a lot of students requesting assistance who might not be able to make it to, you know, tutoring services that are available. Can we host or sort of facilitate tutoring services for specific sections in our dual enrollment program for our students? Our counseling and guided pathways department, and they're sort of having college counselors work with students to focus a lot on educational planning. You know, the CRM advised early alert system that can provide us with timely sort of information updates on student progress, and us as staff being able to communicate that to students and high school partners. And also, you know, the counseling department working through CRM to provide progress reports was very beneficial. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then last but not least, our student equity / basic needs department, and helping us to facilitate a rollout of our emergency grant fund specifically for dual enrollment students. And not listed here is our high school partners. You know, this was more so about what we did as a college, but big shout out to our high school partners who also contribute in the sort of collaboration, the planning, all of that goes into dual enrollment programming. And so we certainly look to strengthen those relationships, hosting bi-weekly meetings, different work group meetings for collaboration. Next slide, please. So in terms of direct student support for the students, the Compton College looked at hiring 3 dual enrollment specialists in June of 2020 last year, appointing 1 specialist per district so that students have someone to talk to and reach out to specifically, right? You know, a lot of times a high school student would reach out to their high school coordinator or counselor and ask some of these college-specific questions. And so we, the dual enrollment specialists really are a point of contact for not only the high school, but students themselves. We also instituted a dual enrollment next steps workshops where we're providing step-by-step assistance in setting up student portal, navigating that portal, activating Microsoft 365 accounts, downloading applications if needed, kind of walking them through checking, Microsoft Outlook, using OneDrive for your college assignments, things like that, and also accessing some services such as Canvas, where their classes would be live, and also net tutoring or the net tutor function within Canvas, so they can receive assistance when needed, and then teaching them how to sort of navigate a Canvas shell without really being enrolled at this point. We were able to just kind of mock how that process would look like for a student and explain to them what the assignments look like, how to sort of engage with the professor or your classmates through discussion boards, things like that. Next slide, please. In continued efforts of supporting success and retention, dual enrollment specialists also worked to process registration and withdrawal checks and provide that information to our high school partners. And we did that at 3 different times, I think about a week before a semester started, to sort of rectify any type of missing student in a class, or if student signed up for one class originally and wanted to switch or had to switch. Then we ran another report after census, provided that with students. And then lastly, around the drop with W date, just in case, students were doing that independently, or if a student requested assistance with that and sort of missed out, running this kind of report was essential to sort of make sure that we were looking at that. Also, provided our high school partners with Canvas no login reports. That's something that I think OUSD was mentioning, someone checking in on Canvas. I think that's something that Compton College can focus on, is assigning someone access privilege to Canvas. We were running a report, but still was an effective tool to be able to say, hey, the student did not log in to Canvas the first week. What's going on? How can we support? We also hosted dual enrollment weekly office hours. So that's able to just have a space for students to come by for about hour and a half, ask any questions, look for support, assistance. If they got an email they were unsure about, if they have an assignment they can't really, are having issues understanding or trying to figure out a way to go about it. Our office hours is really a way to provide that support. CRM Advise, through CRM Advise, we were able to assign our dual enrollment students high school indicators, which taking it a step further, actually labeled them by their the high school they attend to, and we're able to send that out to the dual enrollment specialists that were working with these particular high schools to then provide that outreach, right? So sometimes professor would submit different comments on attendance, completed work, missed work, kudos about completing or doing well in classes, and through the CRM Advice system, dual enrollment specialists would then reach out to these students through phone call, through email, or even text messages sometimes, and sort of provide those updates. We're also able to have faculty submit progress grades through CRM Advise, and these would automatically get sent out directly to students. We know that high school students kind of get that experience of receiving an update on their grades regularly in high school. And so we wanted to sort of emulate that through CRM Advise, and we're able to do that successfully. And also, these conversations through these early alerts sometimes led to different conversations such as referrals to tutoring, academic services, and or basic needs support, including our Compton College resources such as Wi-Fi, hotspot, laptop loan. We would inform students about the Every Table delivery, meal delivery program through Compton College, where a student can sign up, I believe it's every Wednesday, through a Google form to receive food delivered to them to their homes. And also sometimes if students needed, we also were able to procure Beats headsets for students. And lastly, we worked with counseling again to focus on appointments for comprehensive educational plans, which I'll go over in a little bit. Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit more about the Emergency Grant Fund for dual enrollment students, President Keith Curry here at Compton College worked on a partnership with Believe in Students and Equity to procure a donation of $100,000 earmarked specifically for dual enrollment students. And this happened, I want to say, mid to late fall 2020. And so we determined that dual enrollment students who were enrolled in fall 2020 were eligible to receive $114. That is because Compton College is the 114th community college in California. And provide some of that economic relief for students. To my understanding, this was one of the first campaigns by a community college to offer monetary support to dual enrollment students. We noticed this once we were able to see that high school students were not eligible under CARES funds to receive direct cash aid. And just as others were kind of saying before, that some of our high school students are working or they're having parents who were, laid off or facing unemployment. So this was a good way for us to really provide assistance and support for students directly. Next slide, please. And so it played out in a two-step process. Students were sent an email communication with everything pretty much laid out, nice and clear, with hyperlinks to each sort of step of the process. The first one was a Compton College sort of authorization release form. You can see on the left-hand side, that's like our final iteration after trial and error, but we made it as simple as possible towards the end with just asking for first name, last name, date of birth, and a simple yes or no if you would like your information to be released. If students selected yes, they received a follow-up email right away saying, okay, you may not proceed with the second step in this process. And that required students to go to the Equity website and create a profile. And after doing that, the Compton College Emergency Grant Fund application automatically generated for them. So they didn't have to look for it or anything like that. They just clicked on apply. And then I believe it would take about 5 to 10 minutes to fill out. And by the end, students were given a notice to wait about 24 hours for a decision. Because this money was earmarked specifically for our dual enrollment students, if they were enrolled in our programs, they were going to automatically receive the money already. So the only instance when students were denied funding was if they somehow were not in our dual enrollment programs, or some of the information they put down did not match up what we were submitting in terms of a list of students. But for the most part, we did receive a lot of students and through trial and error found different ways to sort of change things up. We hosted equity, or I guess emergency grant fund applications specifically for students, and also created sort of a video step-by-step guide that we shared with our high school partners to give to students in case they couldn't attend workshops. Next slide, please. To talk a little bit about college counseling, this again was implemented within the last year and really was intended for our Compton Early College High School, which again featured ninth graders taking classes through senior year, and then focusing on our other school districts and those cohorts. So we had college counselors create and review education plans, create and update student trackers that we would keep notes of some of these conversations, recommendations that they were providing to students, and make sure that that was kind of aligning with the plan that these high schools had for their students as they progressed through these classes. Our counselors also participated in bi-weekly work group meetings with our partner districts. So we included them in those conversations. And then our college counselors also participated in weekly dual enrollment meetings with the department. Next slide, please. And you'll see here, this is sort of a snapshot or a summary of some of the numbers in terms of our counseling appointments with Compton Unified School District and mainly our early college high school partner. So we started with seniors in the fall. And as you can see, we had a 94% attendance rate. We started to then focus on the juniors this semester, and I'm pretty sure this data is more updated. In the summer or early fall, we're going to start to focus on sophomores, who I guess are rising juniors, and current freshmen who will be rising sophomores, and be able to not only map out sort of these course selections for them, but also really just talk to them about what these college classes mean. And this is also a quick snapshot of the senior class of 2021 of Compton Early College High School. And we have 35 students graduating with that associate's degree, and 51 students who are going to be ergency certified. Next slide. And this is some counseling, a snapshot of the counseling summary with our other school districts that had, that we implemented having college counseling with. This started in the spring of 2021. So we have, our Linwood Unified School District, a cohort of 28 students currently, and 22 students attended college counseling appointments. And then with Paramount Unified School District, we had 80% attendance rate and 91% attendance rate for sophomores and freshmen respectively. Next slide. And so carrying forward, we saw that the direct student assistance was important, right? So that those contact points for our dual enrollment students, we want to continue that, and maybe expand that to more classroom presentations, hosting success workshops throughout the school year, and with ranging topics, right? Not just how to be successful in class, but invite our college services such as the career center, tutoring services, counseling, transfer, things like that. We want to definitely continue CRM advise and those early alerts / progress grade submission. Compton College did move towards working with academic affairs to have this be mandatory for faculty to submit. So we definitely want to continue to work on that, especially the progress grades, so that our high school partners and high school students can have that information. I know we want to continue to support or find ways to support grant funding for students and provide that direct aid. We hope to continue to search out more donations and maybe use some of, I've jotted down what OUSD is doing with their embedded tutoring, or Peralta, excuse me. And so focusing, maybe trying to add that aspect to our programming. And lastly, also increase our counseling service to rising ABU 288 cohorts. And starting in spring, Centennial High School will be onboarding 300 new 9th grade students through ABU 288. So with that, we definitely want to increase counseling services to them. And I think that's it.
Wow, fantastic. I full disclosure, I teach at Compton, so I especially love to brag about Compton. So that was really, really fantastic. Carlos, thank you. We have a ton of questions. Again, most of them I'm going to move to the end of our conversation, of our presentations, but a couple of very specific ones. The dual enrollment specialists like yourself, are you hired through the college or the high school?
So each one, I believe, is under a different pool of funding. I think we have one who was strictly hired by the college, and then the other two who might be half from one of our partner districts and half funded through grants outside of the college.
Fantastic. And that, but you are an employee of the college.
Correct. Yes, we are full-time employees at the college.
Gotcha. So different funding streams, employee of the college. And then we've got the early college high school. Is that a program that's on multiple high school campuses, or is it a different building? Yes,
that is a separate high school. Actually, it's not housed on our campus or anywhere else, different campus. It is an independent high school. I think it's grown out of a middle school campus that used to be a middle school campus, but it's completely separate.
Great, thank you. And then last specific question, and then we're going to move on to Skyline, is how hard is it to pull the no logon reports for Canvas?
I think our dean of counseling is able to pull those fairly quickly. We were waiting, I believe, 3 days. So after the first week of classes, we waited to the following week to run the report and then provide it with to our high school partners. And I want to say that process, running the report and providing it to our high school partners, took about 3 days. So I want to say it's not too difficult to do that.
Excellent.
And thank also, you shout out the distance education folks who helped that, not just on our college, but all our colleges. A big shout out to them.
Yeah. So instrumental. Well, thank you, Carlos. Thank you so much. And he's going to stick around. Don't worry, he's not going anywhere. We'll be able to ask more questions. But next, we want to hear from our dear colleague, Andrea Visinor from Skyline College. Andrea, please give us the good news.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Naomi. Appreciate CLP and their invite to join all of you today. Really want to just, how do I follow Carlos, right? All the great stuff that's been discussed from fellow presenters. And so I'm excited to just begin by pointing out kind of a pause we took when strong workforce program legislation moved into place at Skyline, looking at how do we structure ourselves or build the infrastructure necessary to really support the types of things that we wanted to do at our institution. And one of the things that we did after our second year of strong workforce was look at how do we institute strategic partnerships and workforce development so we could align programs that would really support this work and provide the ability to leverage resources in a thoughtful way. And so this particular area on our campus now supports all K-12 partnership engagement, adult education transitions, adult transitions in particular, cooperative education, work experience, our Women's Mentoring and Leadership Academy programming, our career readiness and job placement. So that was some work that we did to kind of reimagine traditional career services to be more integrated to serve meta majors. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. In addition to all other kind of career education focused grants, Carl Perkins funding and engagement across the campus, as well as just the planning and engagement that takes place around strong workforce investments. And so just want to provide an opportunity to think about, as we talk about dual enrollment, where does it make the most sense to situate? And we really believed that having a strong connection to career education, but also instructional programming would be critical. So next slide, please. Our dual enrollment program, we are in our third year, and we too, like some of the other presenters, have grown substantially. This is we had about 200 enrollments kind of way back when, different partnerships, and when CCAP came into place, Skyline College really led our county in getting those agreements in order with our high school districts and really beginning to focus on partnership engagement and what we felt it was going to require to be good partners. Our first year, we had about 1,201 enrollments. Our second year, 2,174, so just over 2,100. And this academic year, we'll have nearly 4,000 enrollments. Next slide. We do partner across 4 high school districts in San Mateo County, 16 high schools. This year, we have approximately 148 sections. And as I mentioned early, nearly 4,000 enrollments. I will say, I mentioned the high schools because we structure our engagement through high school districts. So we engage and partner across the districts, also each local high school, and we do it in a variety of different fashions. So we have, think tanks and thought partner events with our district leadership folks around what this work should look like. We also then support each high school because they have different cultures and priorities and looks and feels. And so we do some of the engagement with principals and counselors, as well as coordinators who might be supporting this programming. And really think about what does that mean for each of the high schools that we're serving so that it can feel customized and really moving the agendas of those institutions forward. I would also say that we really, we ensure that every conversation around this space is in the spirit of equity and really making sure that we're creating access to college for students who don't typically see themselves going to college. And also I would just say that we, as I move through and talk about numbers and just approach that this is specifically CCAP sections. And so this is the type of dual enrollment that is integrated into high school academic days. And we have kind of 3 approaches to partnership. Our college faculty going in and offering different types of educational opportunities during the academic day at our partner high schools. We've also in many areas worked with high school teachers who meet the minimum quals to partner thoughtfully with our college faculty to provide college level course experiences as part of their high school teaching assignment. And then we also have a co-teaching model where we have our faculty who would go into high school classrooms classrooms, either virtually or in person, and really support the high school teacher and that connection to the college content, in particular in areas where there might be some specificity around technical skill and things like that. But I will say that there's one thing that I am most excited about when we do this work is just the level of partnership and engagement and support of one another as we think about our college faculty working with high school teachers and really creating a space to celebrate and really, imagine what the rigor and those seamless connections can look like. Next slide. And so this is, I just really like to share this because yes, it's been one of the most ridiculous times of our lives as we think about chaos and crisis. And so we have to celebrate bright spots. And so, we ended last year on, just kind of this quick transition. We pulled our dual enrollment teachers, our partner teachers together very regularly, almost every 2 weeks during the time of, the first initial shelter in place, really, thinking about how we can thoughtfully support that. And our teachers did a fantastic job of maintaining the quality of education, but also pivoting, as folks mentioned earlier. And we also managed to expand our partnerships during this academic year. And we will add potentially another 25 to 30 sections next academic year. Next slide. So our approach is really kind of around this kind of 4-quadrant model, really looking at countywide collaboration and leadership. And so we have pathway team meetings. And so we do align and offer our dual enrollment in a variety of career education pathways: biotechnology, automotive, early education, teacher track, as well as hospitality and tourism, looking at our other programming in digital arts and media and things like that. And so we actually engage pathway teams across the county. So we invite all of the partner teachers and our faculty on a monthly basis to plan, to do professional development, to engage, share ideas, and really support that engagement on a regular and consistent basis. We do provide high touch onboarding, which I think, many of the other speakers today mentioned, but we call it concierge service because anyone who knows what the application and enrollment process feels like, we really want folks to feel like that's a good experience. And so we have individuals on our campus who hosted over 600 workshops this academic year. Integrating, things like guest speakers or an industry speaker, as well as, making sure that the folks who are hosting those workshops are acting as cheerleaders, wearing, Skyline College gear, getting folks really excited that they're now part of, they're in college. And I will say, as we reflect on this last year, some of those moments where you see a parent come on the screen with their son or daughter and, give a hug and say, yes, we didn't even think that you'd be going to college and this is what's happening, are the things that really just change, change the lives of our students, but also build that connection with students and their parents. In addition to that, I will just say, we have grounded ourselves even pre-pandemic to do kit distributions and making sure that high school students have access to quality instructional materials. Last year alone, we assembled over 1,500 kits in the areas of biotechnology, as well as healthcare, our allied health programming, and network engineering. So students were working on devices, technology devices, and lab experiences, just as they would have been in the classroom. We also assemble welcome kits for all students. And so we have some student assistants and folks working on it right now to assemble 3,000 kits for next academic year, which really builds, again, that community. Like, congratulations, welcome to Skyline College. We're super excited to have you in dual enrollment. And here's what that means for you and your family. And so that is also something that we think is really important. Our pathway team meetings and professional development, as I mentioned, are monthly, and we really do focus on integrating professional development experiences that continue to move our programming forward and to really provide the types of training necessary to ensure that there's consistency across our high school teachers and our Skyline faculty in the ways in which they're employing culturally relevant pedagogy and a variety of other strategies to ensure student success. I would also say that we did a ton of great work around just grading with empathy and thinking about what does it mean during these incredibly complex times to support student success. Our success rates have been incredibly high for our CCAP partnerships in the population I'm mentioning, ranging from 89 to 93% success rates. And so that's incredibly exciting as we think about their transition into college as they move out of high school. In addition to that, I'll just say that we host virtual tours, kind of industry days specific to pathways that are being offered so that we can increase student engagement and also family engagement in the experience. And so that they're beginning to see Skyline College as their college is what we always say, and really inviting them to explore what we have to offer beyond dual enrollment as well. And a little bit later, I'll show just a snapshot of a social media campaign that we're launching this fall as well. Next slide. So I do want to speak a little bit about dual enrollment integration. I think colleges have been doing a fantastic job in this and just reimagining, like, how does programming fit into the way we do business as a college, the way we operate as a college, the way we serve students, and really thinking about, you know, the work that's been happening in guided pathway implementation and redesigning college experiences by meta major or cluster, or however you have done that work. And so when we, you know, share a menu of opportunities with our high school partners, when we look at existing pathways that already are happening in our high schools in particular, we connect that to our meta majors. We reinforce the way in which that connects to the infrastructure within our institutions. We share pathway maps. We really reinforce the types of tools that we're using once students get to Skyline and reach back into the high school experience so that we are truly building the seamless connection. Our Promise program, we're super excited to talk about a partnership this year where we have, you know, a large percentage of high school students coming into our Promise program, our first year Promise program. And so we are doing a dual enrollment course experience that is building community and identity development and connection to Skyline as part of the end of their high school year. So it's still while they're in high school, so that course is also available to them at no cost, but is a general education course that will take away from the costs associated with the Promise program, but also build early connection with the new cohorts of Promise students coming in. All of our anti-racism work connects to the way in which we engage with our high school partner teachers. We do several partnership professional development events, but also the expectation of how we design courses. All of our dual enrollment high school partner teachers last summer went through Canvas training where we aligned with the equity rubric in Peralta, where we also just really did some intentional professional development around the implementation of anti-racist teaching practices and really thinking of ways that we can support and dismantle some of those systemic issues that impact our students. We're in the process of moving middle college programming under the Division of Strategic Partnerships and Workforce Development. So again, reflecting what are the other types of programs, experiences within your institution that should all be coming together to leverage learning and also expand kind of that cohesive message that you're sending out to your partners. We also have, you know, program-specific course experiences that really support culture and identity development connected to our programming and the types of courses that are offering that we're offering. And so we have general education track, we have, you know, counseling and also cultural connection and CTE pathway kinds of experiences across the partnerships that we have employed. In addition, our career readiness and job placement becomes part of this. And so as we think about resume design and development, interview preparation, you know, LinkedIn Learning profile creation, LinkedIn Learning, continuous learning beyond high school and college and what that muscle looks like for students is also part of the way in which we have sequenced experiences. So it doesn't feel duplicative when students come to the actual college beyond high school, but that is appropriate for the time and the sequence of experiences within their pathways. And then also we are excited to be really looking at cooperative education and work experience. And so many, it was mentioned earlier by one of the presenters that so many of our high school students are working. And so how do we align that with their course of study and really their interests in moving forward into college so that they're earning college credit for those experiences as well. Next slide. Our three areas I mentioned a little bit earlier, just kind of focusing on college preparedness, or really just, that identity development I mentioned earlier, really understanding that Skyline College is for you and that this experience is, something that we are empowering you to take part in. Of course, college acceleration as we think about, reduction of educational debt and the types of things that we really do want to ensure students have access to, and then career exploration and preparation. And so inviting students early and often to think big about their futures and, begin to imagine what their dream job is and how do they begin to prepare to connect and enter into those workplaces. In addition to that, we mentioned earlier just seamless transitions to college with improved and increased access to college for Black and Latinx students, and just calling it out and being very specific, making sure that our program design is intentionally going where populations of students are finding themselves in high school and creating that excitement and opportunity around college experiences in the courses they're already in. I'm super excited to share that we're doing a course experience in artificial intelligence and alternative pathways to technology that will be actually integrated into English classes and a variety of other GE kind of experiences in high school, where we're finding non-native English speakers and a wide variety of disproportionately impacted students. And so it's bringing, traditional kind of academic teachers with AI specialists and folks who are thinking about the influence of tech and teaching it through the lens of interactions within society and not technology specifically, but really creating spaces for individuals to start seeing themselves in those types of careers. We are also working on a really cool project this summer in our hospitality and tourism kind of culinary space, where we are bringing in a series of video vignettes around culinary specific skills and, mother sauces and the types of foundational skills that you would want to be developing, but incorporating Claudia Sandoval, who's a recent master chef. And she is this incredible Latina who, her experience is using her culture to inform her cooking and her passion, aligned with preparation. And now she's this like successful chef who does some awesome things. And so really beginning to choose, individuals within our communities who've been successful and who also represent the populations we're serving to be key folks in training and development within the pathways. And also expanding to include construction trades, journalism and public relations, and other technology programming, as I mentioned earlier. And also that kind of, year one and done, partnering with two of our districts and saying, okay, what does the first year of college look like, and how does that begin to be the dual enrollment experience that all students have access to in their high schools? And so some exciting work underway. And then I'll just say that our student and family engagement strategy is something that we're really focusing on this academic year and launching in fall. Next slide. So to speak a little bit more about that, this fall, students will be invited to follow us on Instagram based on pathway or academic area that they will be engaging in dual enrollment, and really beginning to understand all of the different elements of why dual enrollment is important. And so I mentioned earlier, connecting to pathway maps, but really being able to share that in a cool way so that students and their families, guardians are really understanding that these are the courses that they're taking as part of dual enrollment. Here are the courses that they have left to complete a certificate or degree, or really reinforcing the value of the course that they're taking. I love the slide earlier where it's talking about the amount of savings. Those are some of the other messages that we want to be able to integrate in, connecting them to promise programming and other types of dynamic experiences that students can take part of, and really beginning to demystify and kind of push back on the myth that, community college is, less than our four-year experiences, and really being able to kind of showcase the intimacy, the quality, the dynamic teaching and learning that happens. And so that's something that we're super excited to be able to launch in the fall. Next slide. And, I think that, we've accomplished so much, but I think it's important to talk about some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that they present. Initially and still to this moment, we're like, we don't have the staffing necessary and the infrastructure quite yet, but we do advocate within our resource allocations when we have new funding that comes in, when we're reflecting on our strong workforce program planning, Carl Perkins, all the different types of funding streams that can support this work. We're really making sure that it's clear the types of staffing that we need, retention specialists, folks who are engaging to ensure student success, coordinators who are bringing faculty together in a thoughtful way with the high school partner teachers. Of course, I do want to mention just the lack of credentialed community college instructors and partner high school teachers, because that's something that I think as a state and a region we can look at strategies around. And also, costs associated with comprehensive dual enrollment. We know it's an incredibly thoughtful investment, and that it actually does reduce the cost of promise programs and other things if it's thoughtfully integrated. And so I think really understanding how to advocate and showcase the benefits, but also the return on investment within your institutions is going to be important. And then just the continued kind of systems alignment work around start dates and, high school switching from a semester to a quarter model, and just that kind of ability to be really flexible can be a challenge, but also working through those in a thoughtful way with your partners is something that can really prove to support this dynamic programming. So I think that wraps up my slide. Again, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and just am open to any types of questions that might be out there.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That was fantastic. The chat was alive and on fire. But everyone wants to know a little bit more about the welcome kits. What's in them and how did you fund them?
Thank you for that question. The welcome kits are instructional materials and supplies. They're not gifts of public funds. You can tell I'm speaking to our audience, right? And so it really does depend on the pathway. And so they are customized, right? And so for the basics are a really awesome, notebook or planner, some sort of device that they're able to take notes and keep track of things as it pertains to their course. We do have a recyclable, cup that they can use so they can stay hydrated. And we have really thoughtful messages around staying hydrated and having snacks and things like that, and what that means for their educational experience. So I think when you're welcoming folks, reminding and, using that as kind of a way to message things is important. The other things that we include are, specific things as it pertains to lab kits, like lab types of equipment that they might not have at home, measuring cups, or things that will really kind of reinforce their learning. And also, so they're like a backpack, right? So it has Skyline College on it, and it really builds some identity that they're in the dual enrollment program. And also this year we're doing, of course, hand sanitizer, a mask, and a variety of other things to promote the safety and well-being of students. So I think it's about really customizing them so they don't feel generic, but that they feel like I'm part of this really cool thing. And so it can really take on a lot of different looks.
Yay, thank you. And then the funds come from Strong Work?
We are using strong workforce funds to fund that. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. So many of the questions that we had some very specific questions for our partners here on the phone, or on the Zoom. But some of them are very, very large. Like there was a great question about getting faculty unions to agree to the instructors, like coming from the college, right? And so that, gosh, I mean, that is such a large question, and I think we're going to have to defer that either to a future webinar or a publication, or maybe pull together a working group of folks, because there's so many different models, there's so many different ways to approach it. And but I think our partners, and you all chime in, please, would concur that when working with faculty stakeholders, the most important thing is to be transparent and clear and invite them into the discussion from the very beginning. Can you guys all chime in on, you know, something about working with faculty, and in particular those kind of, you know, technical details about who's teaching, where are they teaching, how is that happening?
I can share a little bit about that, Naomi. I think for us, it was really important, like you said, you know, being transparent, but also empowering the faculty and the high school teachers to kind of bring forward their ideas, right? So in some instances, in some districts, they had to cut career education programming altogether because of funding. And so there was a real interest within those districts to say, hey, we need to be able to do more. And so how could Skyline College really, you know, contribute to what they already have in existing programs and expand that to appeal to families in their communities to increase enrollment in their own high schools, right? The other piece is really the relationship between our college faculty and the high school teachers, so that you're building that respect and understanding of, wow, they're teaching rigorous content and experiences that do often align with the college experiences and what the added value is for students, but not to take away from, but to add to, right? And so language is also really critical as you're looking at those engagements. And also just, you know, wherever you can get some quick wins to like put into place their ideas, again, early and often, you'll be able to work through that. But I think also as it pertains to college faculty, we had, you know, programs that may or have been lower enrolled, and dual enrollment has bolstered those enrollments. So it's allowed us to offer courses in areas within the pathway that in some instances would have been canceled because we didn't have the enrollment to offset that. So it's about kind of packaging that messaging in ways that are super thoughtful, so that it doesn't feel like it's taking away from folks.
We can all win. With this win, 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 win. Leslie, I saw that you had unmuted.
No, I actually agree that this is kind of a loaded topic.
Gotcha.
But I agree, context is everything. I think it really comes down to bargaining units, and, you know, for us, our programming, we're largely Peralta instructors who push into the high schools, a handful of high school instructors who meet minimum quals teach the dual enrollment courses. But I agree with Andrea around, like, I would love to see some shifts. Maybe we lean in on these issues around like adjusting minimum quals or building regional capacity for certain high demand areas that have kind of low capacity as far as instructors go. So I think this is an area of major growth for dual enrollment.
Absolutely, yes. And on our website, I'll try and find it and drop it in the chat. We have a lovely and short video from Bakersfield College and the many high school partners that they have, where there's administrators and faculty members and teachers and counselors talking about how they kind of worked through that process together and built trust and built relationships to come to a place of mutual, you know, respect and understanding, and kind of work through some of those technical issues together. So thank you for that. I am very appreciative. Let's go on to the next slide. We have 5 minutes left. And I thought adding half an hour, go ahead and go on to the next one of that. We would really, you know, get some luxurious time in here, but we didn't. We're packing it with all kinds of content. I wanted to share some things that we're seeing in the field in terms of removing barriers that are really phenomenal right now. So, you know, by now, most folks know the CCAP K-12 form. Students only need to do it once, not once per year, not once per semester, once. And so we're seeing that roll out and being implemented. And for non-CCAP, that K-12 form, that is, you know, the bane of our existence sometimes, The legislation does not say how often you need to collect it. And so we've seen a bunch of partnerships moving to collecting that form once per year, as opposed to once per term, which had been a common practice. And just another shout out to Skyline. Skyline's partners in dual enrollment, the principal pre-approves anyone who wants to try dual enrollment. The principal's signature is already on there, so they don't have to go chase that down. And that's, again, part of that kind of asset-based shift in dual enrollment. And then we do see that, more students are accessing tutoring, counseling services. Before, we would often have high school students would have to go to the college campus to be able to access those services, and now they don't. And so, but to Leslie's point earlier, how do we make sure that they can access those services when they are in person? So it's definitely a place we need to get to, but we're making lots of strides. Let's go ahead on to the next. Let's see. And I tell everyone to ignore the chat, but I am going to address a question in the chat. The non-CCAP form collected, does it have to indicate the requested courses? So this is local decision, but having permission to be a special admit student is not the same as enrolling in a class. So you can have those together or you can have those separate. It is not the same thing. We have traditionally had them together on the same form for ease, but whose ease was it for? Often our ease. So that's a local decision. Our dear colleagues at Glendale are kind of working through that right now as well. Just a couple of quick reminders. CCAP is designed for students who are underrepresented in higher ed or not otherwise college bound. And that is a local determination, what that means. So if you want to really do some strong focused outreach for students who are English language learners, because you're worried that they're not going to college at the same level as their peers or at the same rate, that is a perfect example of the intention of CCAP. A reminder, non-resident students are exempt from non-resident tuition. There's some few exceptions if a student's here on a travel visa or something, but not being a resident does not mean you pay foreign tuition. Email me if you have questions about that. And then here's something that's been coming up a lot, and I just really want to emphasize, except for the principal and the parent signature, which are required by legislation to apply to be a special admit, no student shall be required to receive permission to enroll in any class from any person other than those employed by the college in the district. So sometimes we have gatekeepers, and we need to